Welcome to Teams Tuesday, a podcast about mastering the best about what other people have already figured out. Teams Tuesday focuses on insights and lessons that never expire. You will walk away from every episode with actionable insights that help you get better results and be more productive.
This was about as bizarre and easy as it gets.
The client just couldn't make up their mind.
I feel like we had top.
Went from a project of 20 weeks to just 2.
The DevOps was a cultural shift.
This is Teams Tuesday with your host, Peter Ward.
Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to Teams Tuesday, July 2024. Summer is fully here. I'm actually in Fort Lauderdale on vacation, normally in New York City. I've got a great speaker and guest, Catherine Whitesell. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very well. Good to see you again. I saw you at the community event last month in Philadelphia.
May, I think. Yeah. Time's flying.
That is true. That is very true. Okay. And I know you're speaking about, I'm assuming it's the same topic here, actually, about downloading a brain, how to capture knowledge in 2 weeks.
Catchy title, isn't it?
It is indeed. It is indeed.
A big promise, too.
That is true. Okay. So tell me, who you're basically you've got 3 rescue dogs. Okay. What's the attraction with rescue dogs then?
So, yeah, ever since I could adopt a dog back in 2000, I wanted to get some dogs that needed homes. And we started with greyhounds way back then, almost 25 years ago, and been doing rescue ever since. So whether shelter dogs, sanctuary dogs, and the most recent 2 actually came from overseas. They're Spanish hunting dogs that unfortunately the hunters usually dump them and they're just left to fend for themselves. So they're rescue operations that capture them and bring them to the US. So.
Okay, and that's okay. That's how it works. Okay, fair enough. Okay, and what's a typical day work like for you?
Typical day for me, I sign in the morning and get right in to check my messages and see what's coming in for my clients. I've been a consultant now for over 3 years, and I just dive into the Microsoft 365 world. I do a lot more end user side of things, a lot of SharePoint work, a lot with Teams, Stream, a lot of those kind of easy and accessible tools for the end users.
Okay. Okay. So you started with SharePoint 2003, similar to me. I think SharePoint Server and SharePoint Portal, wasn't it? And then you held that job for 16 years. Okay. When
you don't hear about that much anymore.
When you left that job, what version were you on? There must have been about SharePoint 2013 or 14 or whatever it was.
I think I'm trying to remember now. I think, that's right. We were on SharePoint 2010 when we moved to the cloud. So we moved to Office 365 at the time. We moved back in, I think 2016 was the year that we migrated to be fully online.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
All right. Okay. Very cool. And in terms of are you like a 1099 consultant? Are you?
So I'm an employee at Pate Group, and they do Microsoft 365 consulting. So I work with a lot of clients who need various things, a lot of modern intranet work specifically.
Right.
So I'm not so much on the Power Platform side of things. I'm very much on what can you do completely out of the box with the good old fashioned SharePoint and other tools like that.
So in terms of this session here, okay, you've got capturing knowledge, which is SharePoint knowledge management with Stream and Teams. I'm assuming you're looking at things like routing tasks and historic knowledge and really how things are working or organized with metadata. Is that right?
It's not so much with the metadata, since it's really about capturing information quickly because you're in that time crunch. Someone has just announced that they're leaving. So it's a short period of time and you don't have a system really in place. That's kind of the idea behind this and it was really from my experience when I was the intranet manager and I decided to leave. I just kind of said, okay, what do people need to know about what I do? And in that, short couple of weeks, I was able to really capture through video, through text, through screenshots, the essence of my job, the individual step-by-step things, all of the unique things that are done for this group or for that group, as well as a lot of that historical knowledge, and capturing it in using the Microsoft 365 tools enabled me to just share it in one site, very user-friendly. People could jump in and watch a video right after reading, brief description about what that particular process was. And so it was much more about how to get something that's going to be really useful for your manager when you leave, for your eventual successor. So it doesn't get into the fancy stuff of like, how to then make it really sophisticated and use metadata and all of that. It's just the nitty gritty of capturing.
Which is also particularly important for user experience.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so that's the warm-up act. I will hand the presentation over to you, Kat.
Okay, great. Yeah, and feel free to interrupt with questions as
trust
I go.
me, I will.
Okay. Yeah, so what I am going to share, let me share my screen here. So basically, I've got some slides, and then I'll jump over to demo, and we can just talk about these pieces. But really, I want to highlight some of the things that I have in my longer session, Downloading a Brain, that I think are most helpful to share out. So really, the problem I'm trying to address is that problem of when someone is leaving, whether it's you or it's your employee. If you don't have a really solid system in place and people actively documenting their work and their processes, you run the risk when this person leaves, losing all that critical knowledge, that expertise that they carry. And especially the longer they've worked there, the more experience they have, and the more that they are the only person who does that job. There's not any real redundancy. It's a real risk if the person leaves and you haven't captured some of those key things. So whether you don't have a system in place or you do, I've seen this with some of my clients, technically their organization has some, kind of crazy, detailed, complex system for capturing official standard operating procedures. When those are too complex, too difficult and cumbersome to use, you find that people find ways to avoid using them, and they don't do it until they actually have to. So either way, you have that risk of losing key knowledge.
Why do you think people just don't bother doing it?
I think it's, people don't have time. That's what I hear almost always. It's like, I just don't have time. I can barely get through my day and get the things done that I need to do. I don't have additional time to then capture what I'm doing and keep that updated. Yeah,
I think there's also another bit. Everyone talks about collaboration, but what you also, people are saying is that I need to do an extra step to help you do your job. So what's in it for me?
Right. It's absolutely true. And I am going to share a little bit of what's in it for you. In addition, it's not just, you're altruistically doing this for someone else who will need these resources. This kind of thing can help you in your active daily job. Right. Yeah, so what I like, I say here a good solution, not the solution, because really there are lots of different ways to capture information, lots of different systems out there, lots of different tools. Even within Microsoft 365, you can use other tools beyond these. You can use Loop, you can use Plant, you can use OneNote, lots of different things. But I really like especially these first three for quick and easy capture and making that information user friendly. So SharePoint pages, videos in Stream, and then Teams meetings, especially when you record them. I also obviously Microsoft has lists and libraries, have had those around forever in SharePoint, and those are great for capturing content as well. When you're faced with this issue of, someone leaving or you're leaving, you might think, okay, there's so much that someone does, hopefully, in their job, their everyday. So what is essential to capture? And really, I think routine tasks and identifying what the frequency is of those tasks, that's really helpful. Also, the historical knowledge that they might possess, though, not just what you do and how to do it, but why did you make certain decisions, or why did the organization make certain decisions? Why did you go with a certain system? Or for my case, when I left, I captured information about, when we did our various migrations from one SharePoint version to the next, and why we made key decisions about our governance. All of those types of things are very helpful, I think, for the future you, the person who eventually succeeds you, to know so they don't make, try to go down a path that you already went down and you ran into issues. There's so much that we can learn from history if, we take the time to capture it and learn from it. So I think that's just as important. A little bit more fuzzy as far as how you capture that, but if you can do that, it's still very helpful. And I just did it by creating certain pages that said, here's essentially what our, internet governance model is, and pointed to the resources we had created to document our governance, but also, we didn't go with this because of such and such. Anything that I thought would be really helpful to share to someone else. You kind of imagine the future you, right? And you think, what knowledge can I impart on them?
Because it's one of these things where it's almost like, okay, this is what we're doing, but the question of why we're doing it as well. Yeah. Okay, which sometimes doesn't make sense, but it's important for people to know.
Yeah, because they might look at it and say, well, I don't really agree with your reason of why to do it. And then they at least have the information and they feel more confident in going a different direction. Or maybe there was, a roadblock that you had that has since cleared. And so the person can see, oh, well, that's no longer an obstacle. I can now go this route. So just having the information. And then really those nitty-gritty details, almost like same thing if you were leaving your house for a week and about to do, I'm leaving it in the hands of someone else. I want to tell them, like, this is where you could turn off the water if there's a problem. This is, where you do this. This is where you can find this. Locations where things are saved, stored, any key information that exists that might not be just intuitive for someone to figure out. Sharing that, capturing that in this knowledge base as well, I think is really helpful. Key people that you contact, very helpful. And I did have someone, when I presented in Philly, talk to me about this. She said, one of the problems is with turnover. If you start naming people in your documentation, say, go to Joe for this, it's more helpful if we can say this position or this role or this department. And so I think that was a really good point, because depending on what kind of turnover you have, naming people may very quickly become, just not helpful to anyone.
Stale.
So, yes, very stale, very stale. So basically, answer as many questions as you can think to answer. But I do think, key high-level things, important decisions that were made, and all of the important routine tasks are, especially if there's no redundancy, if no one else knows how to do something, that's got to be a priority to capture. And I add a tip here, because I think this is really, I found this very helpful. When you have a short period of time to capture knowledge, you think about something that takes you 15 minutes to do, and it only takes you 15 minutes to do it because you've been doing it forever. So if you were to try to document that and write out the steps and screenshot the steps, it would take you so much longer than 15 minutes. But if you just hit record and did the process and kind of talk through, maybe as you do it, create a little 15-minute video, you have only spent the time it takes to do the process and not all of the extra time to do some nice polished documentation. That video will serve that person very well. All your ums and ahs and, oh, wait, not this, and, stepping back, it's still fine because you're capturing the process. It's documented in some format. And then in the future, someone else can take that video if needed and break it into actual, written documentation with screenshots. I've done that for a client where I will take a recorded video, pause, write down the step, take a screenshot from the video and post it into the documentation, hit play, continue, etc. So when in doubt, when you have a short period of time, video is huge. It's just so helpful.
Yeah, I should do that as well.
Yeah.
Even with external people, there's a product called Vidyard, where it's just like instructions, or particularly with bugs as well. I'll just record that, and then Snagit has the same feature as well.
Yeah, yep, exactly. So when I left my job, this was an example of the page that I left for the kind of key processes that I would do. And so it just kind of wrote out, as I was planning this in the beginning, What are those things that I need to capture? So plan that out first, give yourself that outline, and then start building it. And if you have some of that built out, great. So you can start just linking or pulling that information in. But really, I built out these pages and gave those instructions, whether I was putting in video clips or, just writing out some instructions. I was capturing all of those processes. And I would just go back to this table of contents and link as I created the information. And so it was very satisfying to just go from a page with text on it to a fully hyperlinked page where I know, okay, I've built everything. All of these pages exist. I have all this content. It kind of helps you as you go through that process to see where you're at and how much you have left to create. And this is a sample from a client where we actually used SharePoint pages to document an entire project. That's a multi-year, very big project with lots of details. We have 6 pages of information. They're very long pages. And so this is part of why I really like SharePoint pages for capturing information and sharing it out to others who need to reference it. You can make a very long page, but use things like headers in the body of the page. And those headers, if you use, heading 1, 2, 3, 4 in the SharePoint text web part, you then can immediately hyperlink to that section. So in this example on the right, I have a quick links web part at the top of the page as a way to jump down to the key sections of that page. So you can have one long page with all the information about a main topic, but still break it down where it's very user-friendly so they can jump right to the part that they need. And then the other thing I love about SharePoint pages that you can kind of see on the next page as well is, unlike a Word document, you can put text web parts that link to other things. Call to action web part is on here. You can have sections that are collapsible. So this is an FAQ page here where we actually use collapsible sections to make it, again, very user-friendly, jump right into the information you want. And then within that section, you can have text, screenshots, video, all these different formats that are needed to share the information that you've got. It's just an experience you can't quite get from opening, a Word document. So that's what I really like. But I do have a warning about pages. They're not very portable. So I do think if you go this route, there are a lot of advantages, but just be careful to build where you want this to live permanently. Because one, Microsoft does not give you the option in SharePoint to copy a page from one site to another. And then if you manually do that or use like a third-party migration tool to do it, there's still gotchas. And one of the things I've found is if you do a lot of pasting of screenshots, the helpful thing that the SharePoint page will do is it automatically takes that pasted screenshot and sticks it into the site assets library in the site so that it can reference that image. When you copy in any variety of ways that I've tried, it's still referencing the original location's image, and they don't have an easy interface to update the URL. So you actually have to go and manually copy the images again, or, it's a big pain. So I recommend only doing it if you build it in place and it's going to stay there. Otherwise, if you want something that's more portable that can move to different systems, then things like Word, PDF, Excel, things that are more portable format are potentially better. I just like all the advantages that are offered with pages, so I'm just trying to make sure that I'm building them in the right spot.
That makes sense.
One of the things that, this whole session is typically about, you're in that, oh gosh, we only have 2 weeks. We got to do all this stuff. Time crunch. I do want to mention, though, that that's not the ideal way, right? You really want to future-proof. And future-proofing means start being proactive. Don't be reactive. Don't wait till someone says they're leaving. Don't wait till they retire. Don't wait till you say you're leaving. Start capturing as much knowledge as you can in the moment, in your everyday work. As a manager, encourage your team members to have a process in place for capturing key processes, key information, and then keeping that updated. You can do regular cycles, if you're doing it as a team, plan for regular cycles for review process. You can add metadata to your pages or your documents to say last reviewed, and then, have some kind of plan in place to do that every 6 months or, whatever frequency to review your documentation and keep it updated. You can have parties and contests, if you want to encourage your team members to keep that, because like we said, you have to know the what's in it for me. If it's just one more thing to do, right? If it feels a little burdensome to.
It is discipline. Yeah. We so I do a bit of every quarter. We're actually doing through this process something ourselves.
Okay.
And it's one of these things where like every quarter, and also having a third party just review it and understand it as well.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a librarian in your company.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and so when we talk about the what's in it for me, what I really have benefited from is checklists. And I have one more slide that really talks about checklists. And it's not even what you typically think of as, the little boxes of I've got to do this, and this, but you can use any documentation really as, if it's a step-by-step process, as a checklist. And I think when you're proactive and you start building those things out and specifically use something like a checklist, you are then preparing for not only helping when people leave the company, because you've already got that stuff created, you're helping when you augment the company, you add new positions without anyone having to leave. Maybe you're just hiring more people who are going to do that same kind of work. Now you have tools in place so you don't have to have so much one-on-one time. You can have a little bit of one-on-one time for training and then pass along these, great resources that you've built. But these also help make your work more efficient and faster. And that's kind of what leads me to this checklist concept. So I have a process that I do as an example for a client. It's a monthly process that when I first started doing it, it took the better part of an afternoon, at least. I mean, it was just so complicated. There were so many little pieces, so many things you had to check and formulas you had to do, like lots of crazy things for this particular process. When I started, we had nothing really documented, so we were kind of working it all out. I started building my own kind of checklist. I mean, it was the process. I just started mapping out the process for myself. And then every time I had to do it again, I kept using what I had documented kind of as my checklist. One, to make sure I didn't miss any steps that I had previously determined we needed to do. But I also then started enhancing the process and saying like, oh, maybe we could do this and that will eliminate these 2 steps. And so you learn as you go each time. And then by using the document as my checklist every time, my first step every month when this process comes up, I open that file and I start looking through those steps and I follow everything. And then as I see opportunities for changing and improving the process or things that have changed in the process that I need to update, I'm automatically updating that documentation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's benefiting me. I'm not making any mistakes because I'm following a process. I'm not forgetting anything. I'm improving the process. I now can do this entire process that I used to take all afternoon to do in about an hour. And that I really think is in part to just constantly using this guide as an active tool every time I do the process. It's always up to date because I'm using it every month. So it's just, that's the benefit you get from that. And, in general with checklists, like you're making sure you're not missing critical steps or saving time because you don't have to sit there and try to remember something. And that documentation is always up to date because you're always using it. So I think they're just really wonderful things to say about checklists. And I think that as part of your documentation, especially for step-by-step processes, is something to keep in mind. And there is a lot of what's in it for me for the end user. I mean, for the person doing the job, there's a lot of benefit to using something like a checklist. It takes some practice, but then you really start to see the benefit.
In terms of like, you get people who are just rubbish at writing documentation.
Yes.
How do you recommend?
Thank you for that. Because yeah, we have a case where I don't want to say the person is rubbish at doing documentation, but she really doesn't want to do it. She doesn't like to do it. And so this is a client that actually is retiring, and I'm helping kind of document all of these key things because this is not her comfort zone, right? She doesn't feel comfortable creating the documentation herself. So what I'm doing with her is I'm meeting with her in Teams, and we are recording our meetings, and she's walking through a process with me. I told her she could go to Stream and hit record and, record processes, but she wasn't comfortable with that, just kind of talking to no one, walking through a process that way. But she was comfortable meeting with me, and she was fine, having it recorded, especially knowing that that particular recording was just for the two of us to use. So what we've been doing is having these sessions. She walks through her knowledge, her process, everything. And then I take the recording. And like I was saying before, I'll actually go through. I do use the speed to change it because we humans sometimes talk a little slowly. And so we can change that up to 2 times the speed, the normal speed. I will often do that with those recordings to kind of get through them more quickly. And then for each part where you would normally document, for this step, you got to do this, I hit pause, I do a screenshot, I type up those instructions and paste in that screenshot, and then I go back and hit play again. So I've been creating the nice documentation that everybody can read and look at the screenshots from those videos that I'm recording with her. Now, not everyone's going to have an assistant to be able to do that, but that's certainly an option if you have someone who's just like, I can't do this, I don't want to record myself. Do a Teams meeting recording, and you'll capture what you need, and then you can document from there.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so I just say, don't wait. Obviously, if you do wait, I've given you some tips and tools that you can use to get it done pretty quickly, but it's more ideal to not wait, to start some kind of system for capturing. Don't let the rigid documentation systems, if that is indeed what you do have at your company, where there's something that you've just been avoiding because it's so miserable to navigate and to create the documentation there, don't let that keep you from capturing anything. You at least can do some easy things like we've talked about to capture something, and then let somebody else, get it into the more complicated system if that ever becomes a requirement. But don't let it stop you from capturing anything. And then again, with the beauty of checklists, don't rely on your memory when you're going through a complex process or multi-step process. Use checklists in your everyday life because it's going to create great documentation that's always up to date. It's also going to help you avoid making mistakes as you do your work. So those are really key takeaways. And I do share some resources when I do this presentation. So these first 2 links really are just for people who aren't familiar with SharePoint Pages or Microsoft Stream's screen recording option. Those are just the Microsoft informational pages that are great resources you can read through. The last thing is a personal thing for me. I fell in love with this podcast many years ago for this very episode. It's called Check Yourself. The podcast is Hidden Brain. And it's just a fascinating podcast generally, but this episode is all about checklists, and they basically save lives, in the medical field, in the airline field. It's really powerful how much a simple checklist can do. This is
hiddenbrain.org, which I've just gone to.
Yes, hiddenbrain.org is where you can find the podcast. Yep. It's awesome. I highly recommend that episode, and then you'll probably fall in love and start listening to the podcast on the regular. So I think with that, that's kind of the quick summary.
No, this is all good stuff. Very quickly, with this, like in terms of Viva, I know you're big on. I know you're getting big on Viva, and with the whole knowledge management. What's your experience with Viva these days?
So honestly, I haven't had a lot of client needs, and I'm usually driven by what my clients need. So I haven't had a lot coming up with clients on Viva. I would actually like to dive a little deeper into things like, Viva Answers, just seeing what opportunities are there in the knowledge management area. I think there's a lot of possibility. And also with AI, AI is the big buzzword, Copilot. Everybody wants to talk about that. And of course, in this session, I'm not generally talking about it. However, if you're doing things like, recording meetings for knowledge capture, if you have Copilot or, Teams Premium, and you're getting those kind of artificial intelligence assisted summaries of what was covered in the meeting, that can be really helpful for your documentation. I do say, I've had some experience with that, and I would say that I find gaps still. I'm sure they're just improving all the time, but I am still saying, oh no, I'm actually the one who said that, not Holly. Or, there are some key things that were misconstrued that the human kind of understands, but the AI didn't quite pick up on. So It's not perfect, but.
Right. So in the chat, I've put your LinkedIn and your Twitter account, or X, might I just add?
Yeah,
it's
right.
Called. So for anyone watching this on SoundCloud or Spotify, it's also going to be on YouTube as well. That's where you can find Katrin. And Catherine, thank you very much. A few tips here, actually, which I was we're in the middle of this, of doing something similar. And we need a better way of just capturing data and processes. And it's almost like we never have time to figure out how to get it right the first time, but we always have time to basically, we always have time to figure out why it went wrong and what went wrong and redo. It's not a way to scale a company.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, Catherine, see you around. Bye. Thanks for your time.
Thanks so much. Bye.